I'm going to show you some of the slides that I'm going to be showing you. You'll see some of the data is a couple of years old, and it's not because we just stopped caring about this issue. It's because we have some really good data. We've put a lot of effort and resources into a number of different operations, coordinated operations with CBP and others, and that really showed us some really good information, and it's very hard to replicate. However, we do believe that a lot of these practices that we're seeing continue to exist. So I'm just going to give you that little footnote for some of these slides that are coming up. Just basically, though, many of the drugs that are purchased over the internet do come from foreign websites. So they may have a US ISP, but they're coming in from other countries. And those drugs are not FDA approved. They are unapproved drugs. They are illegal. So the only way to be approved is they have to be approved in the US before they're marketed. And that approval is specific to a manufacturer, to a specific site where the product is manufactured, and even the labeling is approved. So all that and the labeling has the information about the product. And there's very stringent regulation on the manufacturing so that you actually, in the end, get a good quality product. That's what it takes to be FDA approved. We don't know what any of these products who are coming in from other countries, how they were manufactured or anything about them or what is in them. So virtually all the drugs that are purchased online are unapproved and violate the law, particularly even if the ones in the United States, if they're offering it without a prescription and it is a prescription drug, that also violates US law. So next. And what we've seen are a lot of counterfeit, diverted, stolen, and otherwise unapproved products that have harmful ingredients, have too much, too little, the wrong ingredient, maybe expired. And you saw some of the slides of the filthy, disgusting conditions that some of these products are made in, which harms the public. The next slide. And I put this up here to show you, this is the number of cases, of counterfeit cases FDA's Office of Criminal Investigations has opened over the last few years. And if you look at 2010, the number is the highest it's been. And this is not to show you prevalence of counterfeits at all. This is just the number of cases we've opened. But what is significant about this is the higher the number in 2010, 2009, most of those cases have a link to the internet involved in that counterfeit. And so these are counterfeits that were in the United States but have some sort of link, an internet component to the case. Next. And the number of drugs that are coming into the United States is astounding. Just think of this as like a choo-choo train of carts. I mean, these carts, I can't get a really good picture. It goes back, it goes up, but there were millions and millions and millions and millions of packages coming in, that so many that we can't even count, and we can't look at all of these. We don't have the people, we don't have the resources to actually open most of these many of these packages. Next slide. This is just an example. This is actually a couple years old, but it's such a classic example. And we got this from someone who bought Ortho-Evra over the internet, which is a contraceptive patch. And fortunately, the patient knew what she should have been receiving, and she knew what it should look like. So on the top, on the bottom is what she got, which essentially is a Band-Aid. And when we tested it, there was no drug on there. So she's walking around with Band-Aids on and with no therapeutic benefit. So, so this is what patients are relying on. Next slide. And this, you've heard all the speakers before said how people the deception relying on putting a Canadian flag on there, or the maple leaf, and making it seem like what you're getting are drugs from our friendly neighbors to the north, and they're not dropping dead from drugs they're taking, so why can't we take it? Well, that's not what they're getting. These are deceptive practices. And I'm going to just, for sake of time, go through some of these. We actually purchased some. We went to that website and we made a purchase. And it actually reached us. And we sent the drugs to our lab and tested it. And it was a generic of Lipitor, Viagra, and Ambien. And when we tested it, all 3 samples contained active ingredient. So there was something in there that was supposed to be in there. But when you looked at the potency, which means is it the right amount, they all failed. So Lipitor had too little, Viagra had too little, and Ambien had too much. So Lipitor, a chronic drug, someone may not know for a while that they're getting a subtherapeutic dose of a drug that is supposed to control their cholesterol. Viagra, if they're getting a subtherapeutic dose, they may recognize that. And Ambien, too much, you're going to sleep longer. So they failed in dissolution, one of them passed. And impurities is a measure of, gives us some indication of how the drug was stored. So if it was stored in a hot trunk of a car, you'd get more impurities. So you could see there were some impurities here. The bottom line is all 3 test samples were substandard, and the patients were not getting what they would not be getting what they thought they'd be getting. They received. And this is just an example of deception. And we did an operation, we called it Operation Bait and Switch. And this was, we wanted to test the theory of, okay, so people think they're getting drugs from Canada. Are they getting the drugs from Canada? So over a course of a couple of days, we chose products from 4 different countries: Costa Rica, Israel, India, and Vanuatu. And because we were seeing a lot of packages coming from there with postage stamps that said, or postmarks from Canada, even though they were coming from these countries. So we chose these countries, and we intercepted them. We opened the packages, we looked at the receipts, we categorized everything that was in there, or and looked at the information on the receipt, on the postage. And what we found was almost half of the products that said that they were coming from these countries appeared to be purchased because the people believed they were getting it from Canada. And how did we know that? We looked at the postage mark, even though it was coming from Vanuatu. That was one indication. We looked at the invoice, if it said Canada in it, but it was coming from India. So we looked at different factors to see. So over half of them were not from Canada. And then when we looked at those actual products, 85% of them were from 27 different countries around the world. So these people were not getting what they thought that they were getting. And we continue to see this today. This was a very resource-intensive operation, but we've been continually monitoring, and it's not just these 4 countries. Next. Another thing that we did, again, was very resource-intensive. We looked at, over the course of a period of time, we intercepted over 2,000 packages that were coming in. This from people who ordered over the internet. We opened them up, we looked at them, took pictures, looked at the invoices, and what we found was out of those over 2,000, over half of them had a generic available in the United States. And studies show that generics in the United States are cheaper than generics elsewhere around the world. So then what we did was we looked at that over half where people were actually buying a generic, and looked. So a lot of pharmacies have a $4 list, a $10 list, some sort of group of drugs that people can get for a specific amount of money, and just from the pharmacy around the corner. So almost half of those drugs, these people could have gotten for $4 copay if they've went right around the corner, but instead they chose to go online, pay more for shipping, pay more for the drug, and so why is this happening? And one of the theories we think is because people are using the internet to get drugs without a prescription. They're bypassing their drug, their doctor, they're self-medicating, which is a very scary practice. And just the next slide shows a couple out of those 2,000. These are a couple of representative drugs that we saw coming in through that operation. Warfarin, it's a blood thinner. You have to have your blood levels very closely monitored, or else you could bleed. And you have to be very closely monitored. You can't self-medicate and be on warfarin without a doctor's supervision. Amoxicillin, an antibiotic. Resistance is terrible. Antibiotic resistance is terrible in this country and worldwide. So you shouldn't be self-prescribing antibiotic unless you know it's the right one. Methotrexate is a cancer drug. Dipyrone is a drug that was removed from the U.S. market in 1977, and that was coming into. It was removed from the market for safety reasons. So this is very scary, some of these products that people are getting. Next. So what are we doing? Well, we're doing surveillance. We're looking at what's coming in, trying to keep some of it out. Because all of this has come, the number that are coming in, it's very difficult to keep this out. We're doing some enforcement. We have worked. I'm going to actually go to the next slide. What Brian showed you is Operation Pangea, which was an international internet week of action where 44 countries around the world during 1 week worked together to target online drug sales and sellers. And so we actually went through, we were able to target over almost 300 websites and went to the domain name providers and ISPs and got those shut down. But as Brian said, those come up almost as quickly as they come down. But this was a really nice collaborative effort globally, and I've heard that there's going to be closer to 70 or 80 countries participating in the operation that's going to happen this fall. Next slide. And this is an example of a warning letter we sent out, which is one of the means that we take action and notify the firms that they are violating U.S. law and need to take some action. Next slide. We have a web page where we get information that people can actually tell us about violative websites or suspicious websites, and we get that and we follow up on every one of those through our various different offices in the FDA who are working on this. It's not just in the Center for Drugs, our criminal investigators as well as some other regulators in FDA work on these issues. Next slide. We have some Q's and A's. You can go. I know the time is running short. One of the things is, I'm going to stick on this slide for just a little bit because, as I said, this is just overwhelming, the number of packages that come in, and it's really hard to use the little bit of enforcement ability that we have in order to go after these online drug sellers because they're hiding in nooks and crannies and come up and pop down. So a big part of our strategy is education and training and educating consumers, educating healthcare professionals about the dangers of buying online. So right now we're undertaking a very large effort at FDA to step back and take a look at why are people buying online, what are the right messages that we need to get to in order to change behavior so that people aren't taking their lives in their own hands when they go and buy online. So we're going to be developing a communication plan. We're actually working with others as well, and hope to be working with others to develop some materials. Of course, that's based on funding. And we actually have some website information too. But again, people aren't going to come looking for us. We need to develop stronger educational campaigns to actually push this information out to the right people at the right time. And that's it. So thank you.